All right, welcome back. Ironsides Podcast. I'm here with just Ryan today.
Just me.
Just you and me today, dude.
It's weird.
So I know that empty chair over there. CC bailed out, spending a couple of days away.
We should prop Rue up on the chair.
Yeah.
Get her in here.
If I thought she would stay there for more than 5 seconds and behave herself, I would, but she'd probably try to eat the microphone.
Yeah, probably.
So today's topic kind of came up a couple of weeks ago. I was sort of having a chat online with a guy. And for those of you that listen to the other end of the show, we talk a lot of firearms training, particularly like sport shooting. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of movement involved in that, particularly in like USPSA or the pistol shooting stuff. They're running stages. They have to move from one point to another, then stabilize, then move to another point, and it's all under time. And they're working through what they call hit factor, which means accuracy is important. So really you're talking about a time and accuracy metric. And there's so much skill that goes into doing that, that, a lot of times it gets separated. That is, there's a lot of practice around them. Guys will do this in dry fire where it's an unloaded firearm and they're practicing in their basement or in their garage and they have these little targets that they're setting up and they're trying to move around, but they don't have a lot of space to do it in. They can do it inside, which is convenient. And they have these little sessions they put together through the week, but they're also going to the gym, lifting weights, right? And trying to maintain strength and mobility and a little bit of an endurance there, but it kind of gets practiced in silos. Now there is some movement that they're doing in the kind of this dry fire practice. And the reason I'm bringing this up is this guy had said, like, I'm feeling a little stiff. And like his skill set, again, like with firearms handling is very, very high. I would say it's high, much higher than average. And he understands what he's supposed to be doing, but he's going to these matches and he's not moving the way he wants to be moving. So that's outside of what's happening at the time you're pulling the trigger to try to put those rounds on that paper. Yeah. Right. He's feeling stiff and he's been working on some stuff, but he's feeling a little bit behind. And so we were kind of chatting. And I was like, hey man, maybe get out from behind the gun a little bit and get out there and run around a little bit. And what ends up happening is people think they need to be doing that movement with the gun in their hand, right, in order to get better. And that makes sense. But at the same time, like, what are you doing without the gun in your hand that could be providing benefit to that? And so there's transference over there. So stuff could be happening in the background, right, where you're not worrying about what's happening in front of your face and with the target, and get out and move more, man. Go out and, play some soccer, go play some basketball or something like that. And and to be fair, like there are programs kind of set up around like how to be better at moving and shooting. I mean, I'm involved in a company that does that called In Extremis Performance. And we talk about that a lot. But what we also talk about is like, there's things that need to happen off the range that, will transfer over to the range. So I think I use that example because I think it applies to a lot of people's fitness where they get locked into what we know is important. You need to be resistance training. You need to go to the gym, right? You got to lift weights. And there's aesthetics that can be worked on there. There's longevity stuff and obviously, health and longevity stuff that can be worked there, but you're leaving so much on the table if we're not out moving around. And there's stuff you can do in the gym, but it's oftentimes going to be somewhat limited based on the space that you're working in or what you have access to or whatever else. And it's really, I would consider it almost kind of like unconventional if you see somebody in the gym like running on the turf or doing different things. You're just kind of limited on space. Mm-hmm. But there's a few components that come in and that we'll talk about, like with the knowns versus the unknowns. And my point in this is the novel stimulus you get when you just get outside and play, and how that can transfer over into all kinds of things. And I wanted to talk about that because I think people could use a little bit more in their life. I know when I don't get it, like I get stiffer. Right. I don't move as well. And there's some other things that I start to lack or miss out on and begin to lack when I'm not applying it. So anyway, I thought it would be a good topic today to maybe give some people some different perspective. Yeah.
When you were saying this, what initially actually popped in my head for, the general pop, like not that specific population you're talking about and how this kind of applies to them is, a lot of people talk about, when I was a kid, I was so mobile and I could move well and now I'm so stiff, or even things like my metabolism is so slow or things like that. But as we become adults, we get so rigid in the routine of things or in the plan or what's optimal or what's the thing that I'm trying to do. Like I know I need to be strength training. But a lot of those things that make kids so plastic, so pliable, so durable, so their ability to come into situations that are unpredictable physically and respond, that they can jump off the swing set and not be worried that they're going to break in half. Like obviously there's a wear and tear component with age, but there's also a very big just lack of unpredictable movement that has such a benefit for mobility, for movement quality, for motor control, for motor learning, for we'll talk about like cognitive benefits, all these different things that I think it's really well known to be that we need to exercise and we need to move and people need to go on their walks and they need to do things. Mm-hmm. But the average general activity outside of just the structured workouts, that's what's really, really limited. And truthfully, it's for a lot of people's most of their lifespan. Once they get, college age, they slowly stop doing these things. They stop going out and playing. They're not playing volleyball with their friends. They're not playing ultimate frisbee. They're not playing football. They're whatever. They're not moving just as much as they used to as when they're a kid. And those years of moving that way or not moving that way just kind of compounds, and it has a whole cascading effects of negatives. And just kind of what we'll talk about today, there's a whole compounding effects of the positives of including that. And it doesn't always feel as productive because it's not my lift. It's not my workout. Mm-hmm. I'm not practicing my dry fire. I'm not measuring. It's not predictable, but it has carryover to that can be really, really beneficial. And we'll talk about a lot of the specifics that are really, really beneficial from it. So,
yeah. So if Donnie's listening, my buddy Donnie, I used to work with him back in the day, and he's a VP for a very large, fitness company these days. And I actually had him on the show several years ago. He was one of the first guests I ever had. We were kind of talking about the state of the industry, and we got into this topic, and the way he tells it is like this, and that is, when we're kids, like you say, we're out playing. We're doing all kinds of stuff, whatever that is, whether it's on the swing set, the jungle gym, the soccer team, baseball, basketball. I mean, for a long time, like I know when I was a kid, there was multiple sports that I was constantly involved in. My parents had me doing something, right? And I think partly that was to give them a break from me, or me a break from them. But also like it was good to get outside, little boys being outside playing. And that's what we did. And when I wasn't doing that, like when we had free time on the weekends of the summer, when I was out riding my bike, running through the hills, climbing trees, getting into the creeks, getting into trouble, and all that kind of stuff. And it was all movement, and we never thought about it that way. It was just playing, right? And so as you get, like, to your point, as kids, we're just playing. We don't really think about it. And maybe it is through an organized sport, but you're outside and you're moving all different types of directions. You're building strength. You're building coordination. You're getting vitamin D from the sun. You're getting fresh air. You're not thinking about you might have to sprint, then you're jogging. Sprint, jog, walk, climb, crawl over something, fall down on the ground, get up, all those kind of things. And then as we get older, and I think you mentioned like college age, that stuff starts to get taken away from us, right? As you get to be an adult and your life gets to be a little bit more narrow in scope with regard to what your activity level looks like. And I think a lot of people will try to carry over maybe what they were doing in junior high and high school into college, maybe into intramurals or like some type of a college sport if you're doing that, or they'll pick up some new hobby and they'll do that for a while, but inevitably that kind of starts to go away. And we hear that all the time, when people come into the gym, are like, well, tell me about the last time you were really active, and they'll tell us, well, back in college.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, that was like 25 years ago. Like, tell me about what's happened in the last 5 to 10 years. And it's generally not very much. Yeah. Or it's like one thing very specifically, like going to the gym to resistance training. I have a gym membership, and so I work out regularly. Okay, but that's still much different than maybe what you were doing before. Tell me about that. My point in saying that is pretty soon we start to, it goes from playing to organized exercise, right? Or it goes from playing to organized play, maybe if you're going into sports, right? And then it goes from organized play to exercise, because I know I need to do this, and maybe I'm doing it for aesthetics or whatever else. And it gets narrower and narrower and narrower, and we start to put it into a schedule, right? Where I have an hour or 2 hours a day where I have to make this fit. The gym is convenient. It's down the street from my house. It has all the equipment. I can get in, get out, and then get back to whatever my responsibilities in my life are. And I don't want to drone on about that. It's just to say that's typically the life cycle.
Yeah. And I do want to know, and I was thinking about this, we've mentioned this on other podcasts too. We talk about even from when I was a kid, when we were kids, that's how we played. we've talked about some of the negatives of this silo is starting way sooner.
Totally. For kids.
I have, not to call any of my clients out, but I have people in my life, clients who they have, like a 2-year-old who's already in like these really structured schedules. And yes, some of the schedules are like varied things, but they're still very, very structured. And I don't know, not to go into specifics, but I think the amount of free play and not over specializing even in a sport, because I think there's so much competition to get really, really competitive at one sport or get really, really competitive at one skill, dance, whatever. And I think that even though there's like levels to the play, yes, playing your one sport is still a more dynamic, reactive play than just if the kid is only going in resistance training. Right. But there is still benefit to novel stimulus of even more reactive of different sports. And there's even things that have shown that like, even if you're not practicing your specific sport, but you're getting motor learning from a different sport, it can actually in the long run improve your performance.
100%.
Some of the greatest athletes in the world did not play their primary sport their entire life. Some of the greatest athletes in the world played 2 or 3 different sports, and they are pretty high level at a lot of them. And then they siloed maybe into high school, late high school, into college, into professional, just because they're getting, and that's why they're this, as an athlete, they're so reactive. Their ability to adapt to so many varying different situations and stressors, I think is really due to not being overly siloed. So that's a whole other conversation as far as like youth. That's a little adjacent to what we're talking about, but that is an interesting thing because it is siloed sooner and sooner and sooner now.
100% it is. I mean, I see it all the time. It's baseball all the time. I mean, with my oldest daughter, we fell into a little bit of a trap there with soccer.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it's a year-round sport with very little break time. And I think a challenge as a parent is like, my kid really loves this. It gets them active. They're driven to do it. So let's continue to do it. But as it gets more competitive, they have to choose a position, right? And so they get pushed into that position. And those positions, depending on what sport you're playing, can leave some things on the table, right? And then obviously like the propensity for repetitive use injuries comes up and all those kind of things, which, and or just injury in general that are typical, like in her case, like there's concussions were big and knee injuries were big. That's just what you get, particularly in girls soccer, especially when they're young.
Yes.
So anyway, the point of that is people are getting, they find themselves in a silo, and again, it gets away from playing, and even organized play gets just away from playing altogether, and it gets into, this is what I do. And then it turns a little bit weird, and people start defining their fitness as that thing. Like, how much do you deadlift? How fast is your 5K? Like, that's my fitness. That's how I identify my fitness. Or how much do you bench press or whatever else. And so again, just in opening this up, the importance of talking about novel stimulus and where you can get it from, and that getting outside of the gym, and doing other things. Again, going back to my initial example, would be competitive shooting. There is some athleticism involved in there. However, there are some highly skilled competitive shooters that are not athletic at all. Yeah. They've just found a certain level of efficiency in that time and accuracy metric, with really being efficient with their movement. They don't necessarily have to be super athletic. But I will tell you, like right now, particularly in that sport, what you're seeing is a gap beginning to grow between the very athletic shooter who is also very skilled and efficient and those that aren't. It's evolving like exponentially is kind of what I would say. Yeah. You're starting to see more talk about it. And then as a result, what you're seeing is people talk about it, and people are talking about it. And I'll just say this, like incorrectly or not doing a good job because they don't fully understand the movement stuff. So my just coming back, I think if we think about this for those people that are listening, again, you're not a shooter. Oh, that's fine. Like, but you're just thinking about life, like where could you get benefit? And so when we're talking about like providing these different stimulus to the body, like let's talk about like physically or physiologically when we look at like performance benefit. One of the things is just the unknown, which is what we said, what we were talking about. Like you're out there and you're doing something that isn't prescribed, right? It is ever changing. And so that could be everything from terrain to the effort that you have to put in, to weather can change things. And all of that stuff impacts how your body responds in terms of building, right? Fitness, building cardiovascular fitness, building muscular strength, building coordination, building proprioception, which is, again, kind of a cliched term, but just, your body's awareness of kind of what it's doing in space. And then again, the carryover that you can take into the gym to help you get the gains that you're trying to get, if it's that deadlift or whatever else. Now, Yes, we could also talk about like, look, if your goal is to be a power lifter, right? And so your bench and your deadlift and your squat are the primary things, like how much of this could really help you? Well, let's first identify like how competitive are you really, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
is this a hobby or is this something that you know you're really chasing? And you know, so maybe there's not a ton of benefit for you now, but it's something to be thinking about as you finally realize maybe this isn't the sport I'm going to be uber competitive at longer term, or recognize there's limitations here. I'm just not having fun anymore. Which again, we'll talk about that as we get into some of the cognitive stuff.
Yeah, and so I was thinking
So
about
the unknowns, anyways.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about a quote from. I'm currently in a course from a guy named Joel Jameson, and he's one of the world renowned in conditioning and capacity work. He works with a lot of UFC fighters, and he's really high up in the strength conditioning as far as education. And he has this quote defining someone's capacity versus someone's fitness. Fitness, we were talking about, is very, like we had mentioned, it's very measurable. It's very, what's your VO2 max? What's your, what's your time on this specific test, on this trial? What's your mile time? All these different things. These are aspects of fitness. And someone can have a high level of fitness, but someone's high level of capacity is their ability to adapt to an unknown environment and the stressors from that environment. And so if you're only doing, for example, if you're all your fitnessing is, on the treadmill and the ski erg and the rower, and it's very, very predictable, you may have a high level of fitness, but then when you get put out in an unknown environment, when you get into a competition, when you get into something that's not as linear, your capacity to express your level of fitness with the cognitive stressors, with the emotional, psychological stressors, with the reactive environment, with if there's an opponent, things like this. This is what really defines someone who is a low-level athlete or a non-competitive athlete, I would say, to the more high-level competitive athlete, is their capacity is they can deal with this reactive environment. And this is something that training, yes, there needs to be controlled variables to have good outputs of what is your specific progress on certain markers, but having that unknown builds your capacity. Can you be winded and gassed and push yourself in an environment that you're not knowing, oh, I'm just taking one foot in front of the other on this treadmill? So there's lots of benefits to that too from a high level performance. But again, if you're even just the individual that's feeling like you want to be able to play with your kids, play a sport on the weekend, that might be a missing component for you if you're feeling like that's not carrying over.
Yeah, and we see that all the time.
Yeah.
And that people are coming in and they work out 2-3 days a week, and that's because that's what they've committed themselves to. And then they get the vacation happens. Like right now, we're recording this in February. It's just after President's Weekend.
Huge
it's
storm
ski
right
week,
now.
huge storm. Everybody's chasing the storm, and they feel great when they're in the gym to be able to accomplish the known things and hit the metrics that they're looking for, whatever. And then they go out there and they've got a 3-day ski trip planned, and they make it through one day, and then they're just debilitated for the next 2 days, right? They're exhausted. And
even there's a nervous system.
And why? Because there's all kinds of factors there that you didn't train for,
exactly,
right? There's obviously, well, one, if you're going to say the Lake Tahoe region, the base there is 5,400 feet, in elevation, right? The air's thinner, right? You're not going to be as efficient. And then you go up to maybe as high as 8,000 feet. It changes even more. And then you have obviously all the things that you're dealing with if you're skiing or snowboarding that happen. And the terrain changes, right? Like right now it's all powder and thick and deep and whatever. And then when you get, maybe you're going out there on a different day and you're just riding the groom or whatever, that's different. And your body, unless you get out and play and practice in that, you're not going to, or prepare for that in some other way. And you can do that not going and snowboarding and skiing. Running, going playing soccer could certainly transfer over to being on the slopes.
Yeah, it's not necessarily bringing your snowboard into and standing on a Bosu ball.
Yeah, which drives me crazy when we're trying to make what the thing we're going to do, happen in the gym. Yep. That's not what we're talking about here. So, so terrain changes, huge. Environmental changes, huge. And again, to your point about the capacity, preparing yourself to be able to do lots of different things, and just being strong doesn't do that, right? So there's many components or many domains of fitness that we can be challenging ourselves in, and you're going to be limited if you're just going to the gym in terms of challenging those things. And to your point about rowers and ski ergs and like echo bikes or bike ergs, I think this was one of the great things that CrossFit did for people, right? Because it was in their definition, constantly varied, always changing, and a lot of unknowns. Is it while it wasn't a lot of this stuff wasn't very measurable unless you're getting to a competition, and the measurement was either you won or you didn't, right? But the point being there is that there was always something new, and it was never the same, and it was introducing people to all types of different skill sets to a certain extent, from gymnastics to, weightlifting, right?
Yeah.
There's kind of all and running was included in there. There was bikes in there. Eventually there was swimming in there. There was all kinds of stuff going on in there. And it challenged people to have to be ready for this stuff.
Yeah.
That was a great part about CrossFit.
Definitely.
And that's why I think, going back to what you were saying, when people are trying to be fit for kind of everything, CrossFit seems like the natural fit. And I don't think that's wrong. Like if you're in a gym and you're trying to be ready for kind of everything, like that is a good modality when you start to think about it. The problem with it is because of all the high levels of skill and all the things that you're training, if you're not prepared for that, right, and you're not ready to do those, you don't have that level of skill and you're trying to keep up with that stuff, it can create issues, which we've seen.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect example of that's one of the big positives of CrossFit, and we're making this whole case for some unpredictability in your movement throughout the week. But the thing that will really make you successful is having a healthy balance of predictable variables, a controlled program, things you can progress that are something you that your body can adapt to in a way that is focused on the outputs or whatever stimulus you're trying to, a domain of fitness you're trying to improve, married with some free play. And I think some of the issues with CrossFit is where it's maybe too much of the unpredictability. So that's really what we're arguing is, how do you kind of fit, into your current program? Are you too predictable or too unpredictable, and how do you marry the two?
So when you get into like things like mobility and what like this outside play can provide for you, again, in the gym, what we were working for is some level of control, right? Yep. And it's very predictable, and we're trying to repeat things. We're practicing this repetitive
skill,
this repetitive skill, whether that's pushing, pulling, lunging, hinging, whatever it is. And there's benefit to this, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, again, you're leaving some things on the table with what happens when I get outside this level of control. How do I train? Am I training my body there? What ranges of motion, when I'm not loaded with a barbell or dumbbells or whatever, is my body capable of and has the capacity to handle? And that's kind of what we're talking about here. And so again, getting involved in whether it's BJJ, again, we talk about soccer, surfing, basketball, volleyball, different terrains. You're on a trail where it's uneven. You got hills. You're on the sand. It's uneven. You're on the grass. You're on a track. All of that stuff kind of gives feedback to the body, and gives feedback to you to again build this capacity and be ready for kind of all of these different things. Again, we talked about weather as being a factor, right? It's cold right now. People don't necessarily want to be outside. That cold weather. There's some resiliency stuff that goes on there. Your body is going to function a little differently when it's cold versus when it's hot.
Yep.
And what are we building? And again, if you're going into the air conditioned or heated environment, right, where it's the same every time, that floor's flat, it's not going anywhere. The weights weigh the same every single time, right? The machine moves on the same path every single time. You're trying to move the bar path the same every single time. Again, there's benefits to doing this, but again, you're leaving stuff on the table. So I think just the novelty of going out and trying different things and doing stuff, and it, again, to your point, having a good balance of this.
Yeah.
I think people could benefit more by maybe taking one or two of their workouts outside and doing something that's totally different than what they're doing inside, has major carryover to what they're doing inside and what they're preparing themselves for outside of that. Of course, if your goal is to be a bodybuilder and none of this stuff makes sense to you, well, then you can turn it off. You can turn the episode off. Like, you don't have to listen to it.
Yeah.
The point is like, even for that guy, right, or that person, I think there's benefit there, right? Again, going back to things like mobility, we'll talk about some of the cognitive stuff, the psychological stuff that comes up as well, and how you're expressing your fitness and where this shows up for you, both in the short and the long term. So maybe moving on to that, like the psychological, physiological type of stuff that comes up there. So I know for me, and this is what I was alluding to before, when I don't get outside and play, let's just say I'm not a happy person, right? And like we're going through the winter months here. It's always a little challenge in the winter as a gym owner, because we're trying to close out the year in December. There's all the things that happen there, and then being prepared for the new year, right? As new people are coming in, and it's the typical cycles. But you have like the holidays, and that kind of takes away from the weekends, and the weather changes. So you might not be doing the same things. Like I like getting on my mountain bike. If it's raining and it's muddy and shit outside, I'm probably not going, right? And by the way, they shut down the trails, so I'm restricted from where I can go and do stuff. But I got to tell you, like, it's been a bit since I've been out. Like, usually, like, and every weekend would typically be something different for me. I don't pick the same thing every time. I'm not trying to be the best mountain biker in the world. I'm not trying to be the best surfer in the world. I'm not trying to be the best trail runner or hiker in the world. But I do love doing that stuff and challenging myself. And when there are periods of time when that doesn't happen, and dude, like, I'm not a happy person. Like, I need fresh air. I need to be outside in nature and things like that. And there's some huge benefits that come along with that.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it too, because I do think I've noticed even more of the nature, the outside part of it, which I think is a big component that a lot of people overlook, especially when they drive their car to the gym and then they go to the office and they're just inside all day. Today, the sun poked out and I just went outside literally and I walked around the corner and I stood in the sun for like 5 minutes. I was like, I need it. I didn't stare directly at the sun, but I enjoyed the sun. I think that's a component that I definitely have noticed for myself too. And there's even studies of even like staring at the color green of like how this can impact, human psychology and even human physiology, can have some really big benefits. But I think the thing about play too, I've really tried to dive into play a lot more. As far as I played a lot more basketball. I'm playing like 4 days a week right now, a lot of weeks. And the impact on my emotional and mental well-being, has been huge. It has been something that has really, really impacted just my general joy. It's even impacted my motivation in the gym because I want to have that carry over to the court. Now, I am someone too, though, kind of like you. I've kind of gotten a little too dogmatic about trying to improve the skill at this point, even with basketball, where I'm a big play guy. Like, I'm down to kind of play any game. Like, if we're going to play, I don't know, spike ball, volleyball, like grew up going to the beach a lot. So that kind of stuff like is really, really big for me. And I love doing that kind of stuff. And that's something where the weather especially is really, really impacting that for me. But that's where I want, like, your ability to be able to do those things is really, really important for me. So
yeah, I think one of the things that comes up for me, like getting outside and doing this different stuff, and I'll use, let me use surfing as the example because I don't go that frequently and I'm not a very good surfer.
Yeah.
At one point I think I kind of was, and now I suck at it. And I just don't practice the skill. I lived on the beach for a while and that was the thing we did. But there's a reduced perception of effort, right? Like, I'm not thinking about how hard occasionally I will, like when I'm out there, I'm going, Jesus, I'm out of shape for this, right? But you don't have time to think about that when you're trying to catch that wave or paddle out through the white water or, whatever else. Your exertion level is higher, but your perception of that might be a little bit lower. So you're actually working harder a lot of times than you think you are. And again, when we just get kind of down to the basics of like effort level intensities as we're trying to get our heart rate up, burn calories, build fitness and whatever else, it's not something you're really thinking about. It's just kind of happening in the background because you are playing, right?
Yeah.
You're again, the stimulus that I'm getting is way different than anything I get in the gym. I mean, I could go to the pool and swim. It's very mundane. I did that for a lot of years. Every 4 days a week, I was in the pool, just putting mileage in or yardage in. And I got pretty good at putting that mileage in. But I don't do that anymore. So like when I get out on the surfboard and I'm starting to, you paddle out, you're like, oh shit, I got to catch my breath for a second. But here comes a wave, right? So, you got to paddle in and then you might have to take a little bit of a breather. It's not organized is the point, and it's not predictable. And in that sense, like from a psychological perspective, like you're just putting in the effort. So like if I'm out on the water for 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, I come back in, I might not recognize it till I'm almost in and I'm like, shit, I'm exhausted. Like I just got a really good workout out of that while I was playing. And did that benefit my bench press, or my squat? Probably not. Right. But from a cardiorespiratory perspective, from a mobility perspective, training things that don't get trained in planes and ranges of motion that don't get worked ever in the gym, you're just not going to do that. Again, in that unpredictable environment, there's benefit to that. And again, from a psychological perspective, you wake up the next day, I go, shit, my shoulders are sore, my lower back is sore from being into extension. Should I hit the GHD all the time and do hyperextensions? Right? And I'm doing deadlifts all the time in some form or fashion. Why is my back not that sore when I do this? Because it's different.
That makes me think about, we did it a couple episodes ago. I forget the exact title, but it was basically like how to actually get in your cardio, how to get more out of your cardio. And we had done a lot of episodes prior about the things we kind of were talking about, the predictabilities, the training in heart rate zones and tracking, and it being very, I guess, let's say scientific, very, very structured. But the episode that we filmed there was talking about kind of the same aspect of getting into this benefits of when you're going and playing and doing these things. Like you just said, you're getting a great workout, but because you're focused on the skill or you're focused on the reactive component, the opponent or whatever, you're not thinking about, especially if you're a competitive person and it's in that kind of aspect, like you're thinking about the thing you're doing, the skill, the game, the how do you win, how do you move, how do you react. You're not thinking about like, oh, what's my heart rate right now? What's my, and I think some of those things are again very, very good, but those can also sometimes get in your way. I know for me, for myself, like, and I've mentioned it on that episode where I get, I'm trying to hit these specific markers and stuff, and that really gets in my way. And I know I don't try as hard versus when I get that like fire under my ass a little bit in a competition, like I'm going to work a lot harder and I'm going to really, really get a good stimulus and a good workout, even if I don't know exactly what zone and all these different things. And there's benefit to that. There's lots of benefit to that. That doesn't need to be structured, but it'll improve, like you said, your overall mobility. It'll improve things like recovery and general things that I think will impact your ability to express your strength when you are in the gym. And,
particularly if you're doing something that requires speed and power, right? And a lot of sports do. Again, we mentioned a ton of them. Even, again, surfing to some extent, there's speed and power that exists there. But like volleyball, soccer, BJJ to some extent, depending on kind of what you're doing at what level. There's all these things are again, you have to exhibit these domains, right, of fitness, and you're not thinking about it. There's actually there's been quite a few studies done like on exercise adherence or exercise program adherence. And there's not a lot of hard data. It's hard to collect this, right?
It's very subjective.
It is very subjective, but there's a lot of stuff that suggests that, when you get involved in like outside things that are outside the gym, outside sports, and you find something that you enjoy, regardless of the fitness piece, people tend to stick to it. And I would much rather have somebody pick something like volleyball and just be doing that 3 days a week than sometimes making 2 sessions when they should be making 4 at the gym or whatever else. I think you're getting a lot more, health and psychological. When we talk about health from a psychological, a physiological perspective from doing something like that, if you're sticking with it again. And, as if you do it long enough, you do enough times, whatever it is, the 10,000 rep rule or whatever, you tend to get better at it. And then it, maybe you get to a point where you're kind of bored. Like, and I've said this before on the show, like getting out on the gym floor does not excite me anymore. Like I just don't get that excited about it. I don't love it. I know I need to do it. I don't hate it, right? I get benefit by it. I know specifically when I'm done doing it, I'm like, I feel better. Chemically, I feel better. From a physiological perspective, I sleep better, right? My digestion is better. Like my mental well-being is better. But those aren't things I'm thinking about going into the workout. It's something I get as a benefit after. Like I just don't get that fired up about it. And I've been doing it forever. So it's just kind of a lifestyle. It's this thing that I need to do. What gets me fired up is, we're taking the mountain bikes out tomorrow. Like I get fired up about that, right? And when we're done, like I'm riding that high, right? Of, that chemical high of like, hey, that was a really great ride. It was strenuous. That sucked at certain points. I had to practice some skills, just different. And then I can kind of ride that high into the next workout and into the next weekend, whatever it is. Maybe it's surfing, maybe it's hiking or whatever. Maybe it's out just like throwing the Frisbee with the dog or the ball with the dog and chasing her around a little bit. All that stuff is the stuff that kind of gets me fired up anymore. So I understand like if people are like, no, the gym is my life. Like the gym is my church. Good for you. Like, I don't want to take that away from you, but I'm just saying maybe at one point that's not the same for you anymore. And then kind of where do you go?
Yeah. I mean, if, just to make it feel like Cece is here, if she was here, she'd say, I love it. It's the best thing ever. I just love doing my workouts in the gym every day.
Yeah, she is that person. She's very structured and she loves that stuff.
Yeah. Like, call it to Cece.
And I'll get her to go out on the bikes and maybe get on the surfboard, but she does not get fired up about it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
It's cold, right? Like this is,
I don't like this
I don't
environment.
like falling down, right? That kind of stuff. So I also understand that. But like we have clients that come in all the time that are like, look, I've just now started kind of hiking again as one of those big things. Like we're getting outside and we're going more. And my wife, who was like just leaving me, in the dust, I'm now able to keep up. And before I wasn't enjoying it, and now I am. We get this time together, which we can talk about how to make this work for you in your workouts here in a minute, or in your plan or your routine in a minute here. But those type of, again, there's opportunity to build relationships, right? And talk about stuff that isn't gym stuff or work stuff or whatever else. But with the kids, getting them out, I mean, there's huge benefit to just being active with them. Let's get some energy out of them. Let's also show them what being active, and taking care of your body is like. I think there's huge benefits there. But I think also like on there's something to be said for the cognitive side of this. So we're kind of alluding to some of that. We're kind of touching on that, but there's a lot of actually data on the cognitive benefits of getting outside, particularly in nature, and playing. But if you want to take this like to the jiu-jitsu school, right, and the cognitive benefits that you can gain there are not too many people. In fact, I don't know that I've ever met anybody that's ever gone to BJJ for a regular period of time and hated that process. Like they love it because they go and they're being challenged physically, they're being challenged psychologically. So from the physical perspective, obviously a lot going on there, but from the cognitive piece, like you're being challenged with the new skill that you have to learn. You're having to figure things out. It's a chess match, right? If you want to call it that. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It is unpredictable. Sometimes it's a little bit more predictable depending on what you're drilling or what you're doing. But in the end, it almost always and invariably ends with sparring, and you're going to be rolling and doing things with people that are way better than you or not so good as you, and you have to take stock of that as you're going through the things. You have to think. So from a neuroplasticity perspective and how you learn skills, right, and how you onboard skills, and then how you take that with you after, right, into the other things that you do. Yeah. There's huge benefit for that. And again, taking it back to the gym, right, and how that kind of transference kind of goes over to the gym. There is a connection that you can make there between like, how hard am I really working here? What am I doing this for? What's my connection to this? Like I was on the mat the other day. I recognized this guy was way stronger than I was in this particular point, or I was great for the first 30 seconds, right? And then I recognized like, I don't have the gas in the tank to keep this going. How can I adjust appropriately? And doing more bench pressing or more squatting or more deadlifting isn't going to get you there. So how do you start to incorporate that stuff in that way?
Well, and I think, there's the perspective of performance, and then we talk a lot about longevity too, especially when we're thinking about like cognitive benefits and neuroplasticity and motor learning and neural learning. If you really think about like your day-to-day, these tasks, and there's benefit to having habits in your day. There's benefits to having things that are predictable. Whatever you brush your teeth in the morning, you do this thing, you clean this thing, you walk the door when you leave. And it's benefit, if you were having to be super, super conscious of every single thing you're doing, it would be very exhausting, right, for your brain. And so there is some benefit to having these things that almost go into the autonomic, like automatic side system of your nervous system, of these motor skills that are just like, I know what to do, and it's automatic, and your body knows what to expect. But for cognitive, to keep your brain in a growing and learning a state that makes it plastic, right? It's adaptable, even in the long run for the lifespan. Doing things that are unpredictable, whether it is a neurological skill, like learning, reading something, like on that side of things, taking a quiz, solving a puzzle, whatever. But on the other side of these things that are, even if it's a physical play, but if it is something that is making your body be present and learn, there's a lot of carryover. And like you even said, for your ability to be present in your output and your awareness and your proprioception and these things that have an impact in the gym, but then long term, like what is your cognitive function long term? And I think that's these things that we get so caught up in our routines and caught up in our specific things we do every single day, and people on their phone and they're swiping and they're doing these things that are super, super repetitive. And I think that has a big impact on these things like cognitive decline. So super, super important for that as well from a longevity standpoint. So
last thing to say about that, and I think that, people might think this is corny, but just being outside in nature, sunlight, fresh air, different environments, in the forest, on the beach, on the trail, in the park, whatever else, it's just kind of a mindfulness component.
For sure.
And I think probably doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, but that little recharging the battery, going back to like how I don't love going to the gym and lifting weights, anymore. I enjoy it, but it's not like a passion of mine. I mean, there was a time in my life where I wake up in the morning and that's what you're thinking about, right? Like, what's the workout today? What am I doing? When am I going to get there? How's this going to look? How's this going to feel? It's like a whole like routine of walking through and visualizing. Yeah. Like I don't do that much anymore, so if at all. However, I will tell you, like if I get outside and I do that thing on the weekend, it kind of opens up my brain, kind of down regulates, some other things, takes me out of the typical mundane routine or all the things that I've been worried about. It does help me recharge the battery when I do go back in to put a little bit more effort in sometimes. And I can feel it. Like I feel refreshed. I feel recharged versus, again, this is just this mundane thing that I have to do. I think some people may function well with the mundane and the constantly predictable and do that stuff. And some people, I guess, probably need that, in their life. Maybe they need more structure. They need less distraction. That kind of thing. But for me, like distraction is important. So whatever that is for you, maybe think about that. So, just kind of transitioning, like, so how do you put this in to the routine? I think this is where people are challenged because, dude, if I take this day out and I go do this thing, I'm going to lose my gains, right? I'm not going to get to these goals. Okay, well, let's define what those goals are and let's pick something that can help you. So if we go back to my USPSA shooter guy, like, I just simply suggested, like, dude, whatever you love doing, like, and I think for him it was hockey, if I can remember correctly. If he's listening, I apologize if I'm getting that wrong. Like, go play some freaking hockey, dude. Like, it's not gonna hurt you on your shooting as long as you're putting in, again, the time and the practice. Again, it might not show up for you right away, but over time, I would bet money that it will. Right? For all the reasons that we've talked about. You'll feel a little quicker. You'll feel a little bit more powerful. You'll have a little bit more stopping power. You have a little bit more stability. You'll have recharged the battery. You will build fitness doing that in a different way because it is a novel stimulus. You haven't done this for a long time. And all of that transfers over. Don't expect that it takes you from, C class to A class, right? In that respect. But at the same time, like what value can you take from that? So, I think where a lot of people goes, okay, well, what's the perfect program that gives me all of this? And here's the answer to that. There isn't one.
Yeah.
There isn't one. So I think finding the balance piece and finding, kind of how to program it throughout the week is where people are really challenged. And look, I've been in this fitness business long enough to know, like, I'm trying to give people like the 80% solution, knowing that there isn't 100%. The best I can. That's what the Fit for Action program was for the people that like to get outside and do things, but still want to make sure they're building strength, building muscle, maintaining some level of capacity that could then potentially transfer over to the things that they do. Like, we have a conditioning component that's inside that program, but this is optional. Because if you're doing something else, go do that. If it's BJJ, go do that. If it's running, go do that. If it's cycling, go do that, right? If it's snowboarding during the, you're able to do that a few times a week or whatever during the wintertime because that's where you live and you have access to that, then go do that. But if you do these basic things, right, this is going to keep you more than maintenance level. It's going to help you improve as long as you're balanced correctly through the week and you're not running interference across what you're trying to get out of that gym routine.
Yeah, and before we go into like the very, very specific, like, or relatively specific of what a week could look like, or that some recommendations, I think it is important from another perspective to think about. Two ways to think about it. It's like when you're studying for a final and you're cramming for the final, or I also think about it when I have these clients who especially work in the tech industry who they have a lot of work they need to get done in the day. And we get so hammered down on doing the work for the thing that quality of work and that ability to perform at a high level starts to degrade. And it's like, staying up all night and not sleeping when you're trying to cram for that midterm.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Right. Or when you have all these little things you need to get done and you work for 8 hours straight and you don't stand up. Just like getting some movement or getting a break or getting some food or getting some sleep and coming back with a fresh lens, even if you didn't put as many, hours in at the actual work on that skill or that learning or that thing you need to get done. But when you come back with a fresh lens and better efficiency and a better mindset and a better, and again, from a new lens that you maybe weren't even thinking about to really attack whatever the problem is that you're working on, that's the same thing that happens with these things. Even if you're not getting, whatever your 10 hours of practicing the skill and now you're only doing 8 hours, but if you're coming to those 8 hours, that's a lot. But if you're coming to those 8 hours to practice whatever skill you're doing, but you're coming at it with a better, more focus, better, being more present, better lens, better energy, and better perspective, you're going to get more out of those 8 hours versus slogging through the 10 hours. So that's where, for that person person that's like, I need to keep working on the thing that I need to keep working on, taking that step back can make the thing that you're working on be more effective and efficient. So,
yeah, that is a really great point, just in the quality of work versus the volume of work that you're doing. Just because you're doing the thing and ticking the tick boxes, and I did my 5 minutes of this, my 10 minutes of that, and whatever, like okay, that's the body of work, but what's the quality inside that body of work? And I think that's where people, particularly when they're searching around and they're seeing maybe what's happening in social media and they're trying to find answers for their issues. I commend you for that. Like, you're trying to find a solution for what you think your problem is or what you've identified as a challenge for you. That's good. But at the same time, like, if you maybe just put a little bit more effort and you came into it, I think the term you used was like with a little bit of a different lens, and really made sure that the work that you were doing, even if it was less total volume, but the intensity and the focus, the intention was there during that time, how much more you would get out of it, rather than just, I did the thing today and that's the reward that I get because I know I went through the reps and sets. What did the reps and sets actually look like? So it's a really good point. And I think that's the cool thing about playing too, is you don't necessarily have to go into it in that mindset. You can come into it with kind of not even having that much of a focus, and then by default or by proxy, you just kind of get pulled into it, and just the down regulating and the not having to think about it. The next thing you know, you've been running around for an hour and you've done things that you may not even realize that your body has to respond to. Again, in building skill, building resiliency, mobility, strength, power, speed, cardiovascular endurance, all those kind of things just kind of show up in there without having it to be so structured. And that's a good thing, right? That's certainly a good thing. So again, like, trying to fit it all in is where I think people have a challenging time, right? And so, and again, one of the challenges that I see them trying to, or the ways I see them trying to overcome that challenge, is trying to make the thing that they do the workout in the gym, right? And we've talked about this before, like trying to create an exercise around what they would be doing on the court, the field, or whatever. I heard somebody the other day say this, and I think it's good. I haven't really processed it, but it just popped into my head that, so I should not be able to tell what sport you're playing or you play when I see you work out. I can't. You saw that too?
Yeah, I saw it. I don't know who it was.
I can't remember who it was. And I like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's what I'm doing here is not my sport. What I'm doing, or my activity, what I'm doing here should support, right, and potentially enhance the things that I do out there. But the sport or the thing is the sport of the thing. And again, if you're somebody like me that just likes trying all different types of things all the time, I don't get locked into anything. I did that for a very long time in my life. And I recognized how much I was missing. And then there was like, well, now I want to do all these things. And, 35 years of my life has gone by. Like, I got to go out and collect all these things up and try all these different things. And I'm totally fine with that. Part of it is being a white belt and walking in knowing I'm probably not in shape for this. Like, I don't know. So I'm just going to try to manage myself and be present for the thing that I'm doing. And then every time when I'm done, I've gotten some fitness out of it, and I'm satisfied with that. So, but again, trying to find that 80% solution or trying to figure it all out. Like, I think a lot of this depends on kind of how much you're willing to commit, in terms of time and effort. And some of it obviously has to do with, where you can fit that into your day and your week and, around the things that you do. And so again, like, what do you have access to? Where can you put this in? So I think, like, if you're looking to build capacity, right, to do different things, we've talked about that on the show before in terms of capacity building. There's all types of stuff you could use inside the gym that would give you a novel stimulus that you might hear people giving hate for, right, because it doesn't get you bigger and stronger. I would argue that if we start to dig down to a few different levels, how do you know that, right? And I'm not saying you put all of your effort into these things. I'm saying that if you did them a little bit, you might notice some benefits, some unnoticed benefits right off the bat that become things later down the road. And there's a lot of stuff, and we have a lot of that stuff laying around our gym floor too that we use all the time with our clients. Yeah,
for sure. And again, it's not the majority of your training, but playing around with a med ball, playing around with movement that are moving in lots of different planes of motions, that there's a reactive component, that you have to catch the med ball, that you have to throw it again, that it's maybe not the exact same position it was, kettlebells, Bulgarian bags, Hertz bands, things like that are have a movement base that are very reactive. And I've talked about this in the past, and probably when I'm in one of the best places with my programs in the gym is when I have 4 days of lifting, and then I have a 5th day that is very, very specific around just kind of playing with these different implements. Sometimes I get a little bit of a structure where there's maybe a goal of the workout, but relatively it's picking a few different exercises from these different movements and moving and working on just general capacity and general movement quality. And I do notice a big carryover into my other lifts, into my other outputs, into my other performance metrics. For example, some that pop into my mind is we were talking earlier about mobility. Mm-hmm. You're someone that it takes you 20 minutes to get into your squat mobility to be able to, work on the max strength that you're trying to increase with the squat. If you're moving more on those other days and you're getting into deep squat positions and lunging positions,
how much of that time can I cut out?
Exactly. Now I'm putting that. Now it only takes me 3 to 5 minutes to get into my positions for my heavy back squat day. So there's a very indirect but direct benefit from more movement, more play that has an impact specifically into now your performance, metrics. So
yeah, one of the ones that gets a lot of hate is the kettlebells. Right? And you're either all in or you're all out with kettlebells. And there's these camps that are like kettlebells are worthless. They can't do anything for you. Like, the biggest, strongest people don't use kettlebells. They use, barbells and dumbbells, whatever. And then there's the other camp that goes, oh, I have tremendous strength and tremendous fitness from kettlebells, and that's all I ever do. Both can be true, right? And what I will tell you is the people that mix those in, the people that I know that are not on the internet, right, claiming to be or planting a flag in either of these camps, use both. And these are some fit ass people.
Yeah.
Right. And they're also very mobile people. They also have a lot of capacity that transfers over to the things that they do outside of there, like BJJ, running, cycling, CrossFit, if that's what they're doing, all that kind of stuff. I'm challenged by that one. We haven't really gone deep into that, like on the kettlebell side of things, but here's the thing that like the kettlebell can provide you. You mentioned like medicine balls, Bulgarian bags, Hertz bands, things like that. The thing that it will give you is something different. Right. Again, it's a novel stimulus. So if you are just the gym person that just goes to the gym, that's the environment that you work out in. Picking up a kettlebell is not necessarily going to put on a bunch of muscle onto your frame. Mm-hmm. But what does it do in terms of opening up pathways neurologically, right? From a tissue resilience perspective, from a mobility and a range of motion perspective, that then directly transfers into the barbell back squat or the deadlift or whatever else that you're doing. And from a capacity perspective, the more capacity you have, the better propensity you have to build that strength and build that muscle, right? And from a recovery perspective, it can also be an awesome tool. Am I suggesting for 1 second that you should do all kettlebells and nothing else? No, I'm not saying that. But putting that into your routine for a few minutes, right? A few days a week, right? There's a novel stimulus there that's happening. Right, you're opening things up. You're challenging those muscles in different planes, ranges of motion, tempos, and certainly you could add lots of load to those things. They make kettlebells. I think the heaviest one we have in here right now is like a 44 kilo kettlebell, which can be a very challenging weight depending on what you're doing with it. You don't have to use a lot of weight to start to build this skill. And one of the things that I recognized when I started using kettlebells years ago, I don't use them nearly as much as I did, but was the whole having to build the skill factor and how that got me like charged up about working out, right? It was never all kettlebells, but when I picked that thing up, I recognized how much skill is involved there. And I think a lot of the people that are hating on kettlebells haven't spent enough time with kettlebells or done again, I'm not trying to make a case for why the kettlebell is the best thing in the world. I'm just using something that's very utilitarian, takes up very little space, right? And could fit into anybody's workout routine, because they haven't done things that actually challenge them, right? They picked the basic thing, which everybody sees, which is the swing, right? Whether it's a half swing or a full like American swing, if you want to call it that, or whatever. And that's what they do. And they recognize, okay, yeah, that was hard for a minute and now it's not. Well, there's a million things you could do around that, just like any other hinge or any other squat. It's not what you're holding in your hand, it's how you're applying it. And so again, if you transition that over to a Bulgarian bag, a medicine ball, things like that, and opening you up to moving through these different ranges and planes of motion, different environments, right? Whether you're on a hard surface, soft surface, kneeling, standing, half kneeling, whatever else, all of those things are different. And they're much different, obviously, than a bilateral movement with 2 feet planted on a solid floor with lifting shoes on and whatever else, just trying to push max loads.
I think from this to go back to people get really, really dogmatic, or they look at these camps and they see the camps that are really, really dogmatic, and they see that like, oh yeah, the people who say everything is all kettlebells and kettlebells the best thing in the world, or the barbells or everything should be barbell and barbells are the best thing in the world. Those who are really getting to a place of having some wisdom, whether as an individual exerciser or as a coach, recognizing of looking at all these different areas and finding that there is some truth to these things that I can pull and I can learn what is the benefit of working with a kettlebell? What is the benefit of working with a barbell? What is the benefit of doing sprinting? What is the benefit of even different, nutritional things? And not getting too caught up in those things, but not letting the fact that the people who are the more extreme, the people who are obsessed with that thing and thinking it's the best thing and the only thing that they should find all their benefit from, that there is still things you can learn from that and can implement and get a large degree of benefit from for your current exercise routine, your current goals, that isn't specifically, again, everything being married to that. Even for me, I was very, very, very barbell for a long time, and I couldn't move well, and I was stiff, and I had pain, and my capacity sucked. Do I still do barbell lifts? Yes, I do them now to this day. Do I do everything kettlebells? No, but do I implement kettlebells and movement and things? And do I see that it impacts everything along the chain? And do I pull things from different little areas and camps and modalities? That's really the way you should think about it for a majority of people, unless you are, like you said, the 1% per competitive bodybuilder that really needs to isolate on this specific thing.
Yeah, then don't use kettlebells.
Exactly.
Right? But again, going back to the playing, what it does is it opens up this environment where you can play and experiment and use new things and try new things, and you don't have to do it for forever. Right? Try it for a couple of weeks at a time, then move on to something else. Maybe it's the kettlebell, maybe it's the mace, maybe it's the Bulgarian bag, right? You're putting these things in for a few minutes a day and again, at an appropriate place in time in your workout. In your case, it's like that 5th day.
Yeah.
My routine stays very structured, for 4 days with regard to whatever the basic movements are. I'm lifting, I'm resting, lifting. And then on that 5th day, I'm adding things in that are different. Maybe I'm not very good at, right? That's a clue, man, right? Like do some stuff you're not very good at and how that transfers over. And again, it would be the same as going out and playing basketball. Like it was what you do. Like this is just very different than what I do in the gym. And again, so I want to bring it back to the play and the novel stimulus component. That is one of the biggest benefits I think you can get from something like kettlebell training or Bulgarian bag training is it's completely different. You're not going to ever be able to, you're not going to do those things. People will argue, oh, you can do a dumbbell snatch. Not the same. It's still different, right? You could still do a dumbbell clean. Yeah, still not the same, right? Yeah. It's different, right? There's a rotational component in there. And people, if you want to argue with me and debate with me, you can, but from a physics perspective, it's different, right? And it also provides you a lot more variability. And again, so if we're looking for novel stimulus to open things up and challenge ourselves in both the physical and the psychological, in a neural type of way, it's a great tool. And there's lots of them out there. And so you could be using these things in the gym rather than getting outside, like we suggested, and playing a sport or being involved in an activity. But even that will then transfer over into any of those activities if you're doing those things outside.
Well, and I think that the reason that a lot of people struggle with finding time in the gym to play, and I think that can be really, really beneficial. And I think that's a perspective that a lot of people don't think about. But I think when people find their hour to go to the gym, especially if they're busy and they have kids and they have a job and they have responsibilities, is they feel like it's almost a little selfish to take that time just for themselves to go do that thing and find those multiple days to do. So I think it can be really, like we said, if you're struggling to find it outside the gym, you can mix it into the gym as a piece of the current program. But on the other side of things, if you're the person who's struggled to getting that and wanting to get other benefits or almost like check other boxes, these things that are really beneficial for play outside of it is it can be, for example, a social component. Like you'd go out and you go meet with your buddies. And I think a lot of people now, even when they do socialize, whether it's with friends or family or their immediate family, a lot of it isn't rooted around things that are physical and active and play.
Absolutely.
It's let's go just sit and have dinner at a restaurant. Let's just go come over to our house. Let's just talk. Let's watch a movie. That's where a lot of the socializing is now, where encourage your friends to encourage your buddies. Like, hey guys, like remember we used to go play pickup basketball? Let's go play basketball when we hang out. We can grab a coffee healthy after.
We can be terrible at it.
We can be terrible at it. And that's a way to check 2 boxes if that's the way your mindset works of you're getting some play, you're getting some of those benefits, but you're also getting that time with your buddies. On the other side of things, even more immediately, like going out and playing with your kids, going and playing with your wife, going and play with your partner and going out and, hey, let's go to the park and let's all throw around a ball together. Things that are not just, hey, we're at home, this is the routine. I made us dinner, we watched a movie together, the kids went to bed. Like, I think people get really, really stuck in that. And so, yeah, it's not that selfish, quote unquote, hour that you took when you have these other responsibilities. That is checking the box of getting time with your family. That is very, very, very beneficial and cognitively, emotionally, psychologically, long-term. In addition to, hey, how can you go be active when you do those things? It doesn't need to be go sit on the couch and melt on the couch. So.
Yeah, I think about that too. Like Cece, if like I said, like, hey, let's go. She skis, I snowboard. Like you want to go, as long as we have the time to do it or whatever, we can get away. She'll be like, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
If I said, let's go surfing, she could do without that unless it's warm.
Yeah.
So, but what she'll do is she'll go walk the dog on the beach while I'm in the water.
Yeah.
Right. Or whatever. Or she'll read a book. Right. Which is like her down regulation time and her time before she does what she loves to do, which is just come to the gym and lift weights. Like her thing. But I like where you're going with that. And, as a dad, like as a parent, as a gym owner, like I think it's important to bring community together, whether that's your family or outside, and spend that time and get outside the norm, rather than coming in and trying to keep your head down at the gym with your headphones on. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't even want to watch what that guy's doing over there because it's annoying me and it's irritating. The tripod set up with the girl and the thing that she's doing over there in the corner. Like I think it would benefit people. So I guess to wrap it all up, the point in all of this was there are many benefits to getting outside of the gym. And from a gym owner's perspective, that might sound counterintuitive to tell somebody to spend less time at the gym. I'm not even saying spend less time at the gym. I'm just saying spend some time outside doing some different things and watch that carryover. And a lot of it is very subjective. It's not measurable until it might be, right? Again, from some of these fitness domain components, whether that's your cardiovascular endurance. Like if you hate getting on a treadmill or you hate getting on a stationary bike, don't, right? Get outside and do something else. And it doesn't need to be riding a bike outside or running outside. It could be anything. All that stuff builds fitness. Again, don't define it as my fitness is the 5K, my fitness is the deadlift, my fitness is CrossFit, whatever else. How are you expressing that? What are you doing? How are you bringing this all together to where it's benefiting you? Now, again, I'll say this. I know it's tough to you want to do the perfect thing. Like, what's the perfect thing that gets me to where I want to go? I would just say, don't try and do that. That's a mistake. That's a trap. Just go play something. Go figure it out. Get outside and do some stuff. And again, maybe that just starts with a hike. Again, you can take the dog, you take the wife, take the kids, take your buddies, whatever. Go outside, get out in nature and see how your fitness shows up for you, right? Because you'll probably learn some things. If you hate hiking and you decide you hate hiking, do something else. Yeah. There's a million things you could do. And again, like when we're staring at the internet, we're staring at the interwebs all day long. You see the gym is such this important thing. It's almost like a status thing, like you have to go to the gym. If you don't, you're a loser. Like look, you're not a loser, but I'll tell you what, you will lose out if you don't go to the gym to lift weights. Yeah. Right. That doesn't mean you're a loser. What I'm saying is like find something that works for you and get outside and do that. Particularly if you're a regular gym user that's doing this stuff, you probably find a ton of benefit out of it. I've talked to and dealt with a lot of coaches in my time, and all of them invariably at some point recognize like there's something better than here. This is just a small part of what I should be doing physically to take care of myself. Again, if your goal is performance based, like, trust me when I tell you, like if you've been that athlete or that competitor, I'll go all the way back to my shooting component. If all you're doing is dry firing and going and shooting matches, then you're leaving shit on the table. There's stuff that you could be doing and it's not shooting and it's not dry firing that will help you get better at that. As an example, if you're into BJJ, look, going to BJJ is going to get you better at BJJ. But if there are things that you're lacking in on the mat, whether it's strength, endurance, right, mobility, those kind of things, like you're not necessarily going to pick that up there, especially if you're later in the belt system and you've been doing this for a long time. If you're lacking things, maybe a little less BJJ and maybe spend some time somewhere else to build the components that transfer over. And it's not that complicated. So that's what I wanted people to take away. It's not complicated, right? It isn't. Like people will try and make that complicated and they'll try and sell shit to you. Not trying to do that here. I'm just saying, if you really think about this for a minute, again, I don't know too many people that don't enjoy getting outside and being active, right? I don't. The people that don't enjoy going outside and being active are also not going to the gym. Mm-hmm. So if I can't help you until you decide you want to do that. But if you're going to the gym, right, you could be enhancing your life and your fitness and your cognitive ability and your ability to compete at something that you want to compete at by getting outside and playing. That's all I got to say about that.